Starting up. Alrighty, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast. My name is Adrian Lloyd, and I'm joined here today for my live stream with Tom Binnz, The Piper Report, Gran Torino, Analytical Chick, and 40 Ounce. How y'all doing today?
Hey, what's up, man?
Good. Howdy.
Hi.
All right. We're going to start off the day today because there was a big mass shooting in Florida earlier this week, which has led to, as usual, there's always the gun control debate that comes up. So I was thinking, Tom, I know that you are big about your Second Amendment, so why don't you start us off about that?
Absolutely. This is always the initial reaction to all of these events, and it's, while I understand people's initial reaction to want to immediately go to blaming the tools used, and I understand that it may seem effective in a way, because a lot of times people look at like Australia and they'll go immediately that, well, Australia banned semi-automatics and their gun rates or gun crime went down or whatever, and they never had another mass shooting. Well, for instance, Australia never really had a mass shooting issue. Secondly, they live in a completely different society and culture. And thirdly, their actual criminal rates went up after. Their violent crime rates maintained the same and went up. But the biggest thing that I notice is people will immediately come after one gun. They're like, well, the AR-15 is the one that these shooters use. Well, that's because it looks cool, for one. Secondly, it doesn't actually, it's, in my opinion, right, as being a pretty avid gun guy, it's actually not the most effective way to do a mass shooting to begin with. A more effective way would be dual wielding pistols. I mean, just running around with two pistols, two on your holster and New York reloading, and you could cause way more damage. But it's just the ignorance of people that have no concept about firearms trying to legislate them. I mean, there are multiple guns out there that are identical to the AR-15 in functionality, same caliber, same magazine capacity. Like the Ruger Mini 14 is one. And I live in a state where AR-15s are banned right now, at least in their normal configuration, unless you had them pre the new law. And the Ruger Mini 14 is still completely legal. You can go to the store, buy it cash and carry, and it's practically an identical gun. And it's just an irrational argument, because no one wants to actually tackle the real issue, which is society and culture. That we have a society where we've completely had a breakdown of the family. We've had a breakdown of just moral fiber. We're fractionalized. We're a society that is compartmentalized in kind of this cultural Marxist way that they've manufactured it, and we are not a cohesive unit anymore. And we see each other as the enemy, and we're avoiding the real systematic problem that is causing these shootings, and we're focusing on the tools used. It's like focusing on cars and not alcoholism as a way to combat DUIs. It's practically irrational. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in and argue with me on that, but that's my position. I don't see any real effective change coming out of banning an AR-15 or banning assault weapons. You're still going to have the same exact type of situations, if not worse, after that.
I think, too, with Australia, what people conveniently leave out is that Australia in itself is secluded. It's not surrounded by anything. So when they actually ban guns, they don't have other countries that are trying to bring guns over in a nefarious manner. So like if we would, for the sake of argument, ban all guns, Mexico would, the drug cartels in general, would try to bring guns over the country, and there would be crime. I mean, some of the statistics in gun crime it's insane. Like 98.4% of gun or mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. That's just one example. And 60% of gun deaths are from suicide. So people think there's so many gun crimes. Well, yeah, but the majority of the deaths are suicide. And then the CDC, they estimate that I think it's 80% of gun homicides are gang related. So the question becomes, how many gang members do you know go to their local gun store, buy a gun with their valid ID, and then go shoot up a rival gang member?
Well, the big issue is that when you actually look at the amount of gun violence that is not gang, drug, or suicide related, it's like 3% of actual gun crime is actually someone premeditatedly going out and committing a homicide that is not gun related or not gang related. And it's just there's a lot of demographic issues with it too. Stefan Molyneux does a really great video called, or it's a presentation, The Truth About Gun Control, where he really breaks down the statistics on it. And like you said, it's pure intellectual dishonesty. It's people that are scared, right? They see this scary black gun and they think that, you know, it's this mad. And I see these comments. This woman today was on Facebook and was like, you know, we need to ban the, you know, guns specifically made to kill mass amounts of people, you know, and make people be able to kill more effectively. And I'm like, lady, there's no, you could take a, you know, any other semi-automatic rifle and shoot, and then shoot an AR-15. An AR-15 does not make you a better shooter overnight. You know what I mean? And specifically in a situation of like a lot of these where you have movie theaters, schools, closed confined quarters, like I've said before, a multiple pistols is a way more effective method of doing that. I mean, you're going to have larger bullets creating more damage in a small space. It's just the fact that like, you know, this type of rifle looks cool. It looks military. And it's something that's kind of in Americana, like whether you want to like it or not, the AR-15 is the American rifle. It has been since its inception in the I guess really for the civilian 1970s. And it's something that is an American thing that people like. And that's kind of the gun that they go to. And another massive, like dishonest thing about this is just, you know, the fact that people don't want to actually listen to anybody who knows what they're talking about. You know, they never want to bring on a gun expert. They never want to bring on somebody who understands how this works. It's always just these talking heads that have agendas to push. And it's really dishonest. And I think that if people would actually understand how things work and understand the mechanics and understand that just because you ban something because it looks you're not going to change the issue. It's just skirting the real problems. And I think that's where you're sacrificing people's individual liberty and not even solving the problem to begin with. It's counterproductive.
Well, whenever they do tend to bring on anybody into the news that is there to talk about gun control, in favor of guns, they always try and find like the craziest person they can who will advocate for essentially even saying that they think people with mental problems should be able to have a gun. One example of this was a few years ago when John Oliver was working on The Daily Show. He brought in some guy to discuss, someone from the NRA to discuss gun control. And the guy was just the most unreasonable person ever. And I'm not advocating for gun control at all, but I mean, like, you can get someone on there who's reasonable, who can give a good argument, not somebody who just screams like Alex Jones, you know, 1776 will happen again if you take our guns away from us. You know, you can have a reasonable argument.
And the idea that they're going to come and take guns is irrational. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. They're never going to succeed in that. You know what I mean? You would have a massive revolt. I mean, the true tactic is like what we're seeing with this. I posted something on Facebook about it. They're doing a march, a school walkout. It's the people who organize the Women's March are trying to organize this school walkout. And that's the thing. If you can control what they're trying to do is the long game. You're trying to control the sale, right? And then you're trying to indoctrinate the younger generation to see guns as something evil, guns as something bad, guns as something we shouldn't have. So then when we die and our kids take, they'll willfully turn them in. And you just basically end up with a subservient population. They fully understood you will never have a Australia-style gun buyback in this country. It will never happen. And I mean, look at what happened. I think Massachusetts or New York decided they were going to ban assault weapons. You had to turn them in or file for some permit for them, and no one did it. They showed up at the State House and burned the permits. I mean, it's never going to happen. So it's really about indoctrinating the youth and then controlling the sale now to kind of limit. And the idea that you're going to have any effective gun control in a country that has 370 million guns in it, it's not going to happen ever.
Well, even if they tried that, again, I think was it Piper who may have already mentioned about Mexico moving guns into America if that was to happen. That happens all over. It's we have gun control in Canada, yet weapons come across the US border all the time, and that's exactly the type of weapons that people get their hands on. So it all goes through the black market anyway, so you disarm the citizens, but it doesn't stop any of the criminals from getting their weapons. So
not to mention, you're not gonna get the guns out of circulation that are already in circulation. I mean, even if they get law-abiding citizens to turn most of theirs in, there's still like people own guns and they die. I used to watch the show Auction Hunters, and I don't know if you ever watched that show. I think it ended. I don't think it's on anymore. But they would go and they would buy entire storage units, and I don't know if it was staged for the show, but they used to find guns, but they also knew which places were good neighborhoods to get good, like they would go to like rich areas where people were hobbyists, and so they would find like hobbyist type storage units, but they would find guns in the storage units, and I'm sure quite a few of these, probably the people who owned the guns probably died. I mean, some of these were probably like elderly people, had a storage unit and they passed away, and their kids like, lost the unit and stuff.
Yeah, but there's actually laws to that too as well. If you find a gun that isn't, I think, prior 1950, I think it's like somewhere in, I think, the 1950s, if it's not prior to that, you do have to turn it into the police. And then if it is something, you can, then get it transferred to you. But in most states, you can't just find a gun and keep it either. But I understand what you're saying, that they're out there, people are going to find them.
If nobody knew that it was there, like they would say that too. They would be like, yeah, if the auctioneer didn't see it, they didn't bother. But they were usually selling them to gun dealers anyway, so it didn't really matter.
Anybody with access to a CNC machine that works in any kind of manufacturing facility can build a gun in 2 days on that. It's not. It's one of these arguments. It's like,
aren't people 3D printing them now?
Yeah, but that's not a really effective. I mean, it works for a few times, but that was a big issue that went down with that. But I mean, really, anybody with access to a milling machine or a CNC cutting machine, I mean, can really upload a program and build an actually fully functional, long-term, high quality rifle, like in a matter of a day.
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't even think it's a matter of accessibility as to who can get their hands on any specific, quote unquote murder machine. But I was talking to a guy named Rat Resistance, and he's from Norway. And one of the things we got to talking about was actually gun crime and everything. And he said, well, we practically have no crime here in Norway. That accent, but
for now.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. We have no crime in Norway. And I said, well, this is most likely a societal difference. I mean, society in Norway is, it's, the population is far lower, and, cities aren't as packed and clustered. And looking at studies that have been done on the human psyche, being in proximity to great amounts of people is not exactly the best thing in terms of social development and all that other stuff. And the same is, of course, true for the opposite. Not being around enough people, you kind of lack the social skills. So it's a kind of give and take. But being in these large cities where there's a cognitive dissonance between you and your neighbor, and you'll find it just perfectly acceptable to go out and shoot up the rival gang. That's a huge difference in terms of just how society is organized.
I think too, it kind of all circles back to, I think, what Tom said regarding education. Just an example here. Most people, when they hear AR-15, they think of assault rifle. An AR-15 is not an assault rifle. AR means Armalite rifle. Assault rifle is a fully automatic weapon that is used in military warfare. I think that's like the first off, that's one of the big misnomers. The second one, this has recently popped up ever since this shooting. They're trying to attack Trump. They're saying that Trump made it easier for mentally ill people to purchase weapons. And that is just wrong in so many aspects. What Trump did
falls under the state, doesn't it?
Well, what
doesn't
Trump
it fall
did
under the state how easy you can buy
a Trump reverse Obama's EO, that he basically said, Obama said that if the Social Security, if the people that work there say you're not allowed to get Social Security for whatever means, then you're not allowed to buy a gun. And that violates your due process. You have the right to purchase a gun under the Second Amendment, which is your constitutional protected rights and liberties. So what Obama did, he tried to usurp the authority of the Second Amendment and allow an organization in the federal government to dictate who is allowed to purchase guns based on who they deemed is morally, or not morally, mentally ill or mentally sane. So what Trump did, he basically just reversed that order. And now they're trying to say that, well, Trump's making it easier for mentally ill people to buy guns. This is all Trump's fault and blah, blah, blah. It's just people just don't know what they're talking about. They just want to all of a sudden put blame on somebody else.
Yeah, and that's an argument.
Oh, sorry.
My thing with that is that if you want, I mean, if you want to ban somebody from purchasing firearms, you know, because they're schizophrenic or whatever, and I mean, I can understand, you know, the rationale behind that, and you know, I in a lot of ways don't oppose that, but you need to go through a court system. There needs to be a legal process where you have a legal defense and you can argue your case, and then you should be able to appeal that down the road. I mean, there's situations where, you know, somebody may go through a bad divorce and they're depressed, and maybe it's just, you know, they're at that point probably shouldn't be in you know, maybe possession of something like that. However, you know, that's not to say that 2 years from now that's not an issue. And this always been an argument I've had against the felony aspect too, because, you know, there are people with marijuana possession charges from the 1970s that can't buy firearms because it was a felony in their state in that time frame. And I've always felt that for nonviolent felonies, a nonviolent felony, you know, we're talking somebody that writes a bad check in the 1980s, you know, you should be able to appeal that. If you've gone, you know, let's make a number, it's 7, 10, 15 years, whatever number you want to pick. If you've gone that long without any confrontation with the law, you should be able to forward an appeal, you know what I mean? An appeal to get your right back. And this obviously is strictly nonviolent. I'm not talking about allowing people who are, you know, rapists or who attempted murder charges or whatever, but, you know, people with drug possession charges or whatever. And you know, all of the whole legal aspect of having due process is relevant and important, because when you start allowing bureaucracies and just, you know, an individual doctor or an individual worker at an administration to just be able to decide who has rights and who doesn't, I mean, you're on a slippery slope to totalitarianism right there.
Well, I mean, to me, it's never seemed more. It's never made more sense, the idea that you have your guns for the idea of fighting against a corrupt government, because, you know, where I'm dealing with, my prime minister has full out said that he respects China for their basic dictatorship because it allows them to get shit done. So when you hear your leader saying words like that, it kind of makes you feel like you want to go out and buy a gun just in case. So I understand that. If you guys, oh, go ahead.
No, I said the stupidity of the left in America is just blows my mind. The same people that are talking about somebody's a giant orange Cheeto trying to kill brown people and enslave women are now telling you that you shouldn't be able to own guns. And it's like, you're freaking retards. I mean, the whole point of this it was to oppose totalitarian regimes. You're claiming that there's a
I'm sorry, I couldn't read this.
You're claiming that there's a totalitarian regime in power, and then you're advocating for gun control at the same time. It's just so irrational. But you know, and this is something I actually recorded a video on this, but I didn't post it yet. You know, just from a political standpoint, like the Republicans in this have to do something, right? They've got to make some kind of innocuous move that doesn't affect a very large amount of people, or else it's going to allow the left to continue to campaign on this, specifically in 2018. Feinstein actually brought up one, and I don't agree with her plan, but it was effectively saying that anybody that moving, because in America you have to be 21 to buy a handgun, and they were talking about moving the age to buy a rifle to 21. And I don't agree with that for all rifles, but some part of me says that to get this heat off a little bit, it might not be a bad idea. And some of you guys are probably going to disagree with me on this. And fundamentally, I don't agree with it, right? This is strictly just a pragmatic political play, not my actual what I fundamentally believe. But maybe moving that, like, I don't know, whatever you want to classify a quote unquote assault weapon as, moving that to age 21. Because here in Maryland, that was always the law. Anything that was considered a regulated firearm, which was like AR-15s, AK-47, stuff before they banned them, you know, you had to be 21 and go through a little bit extended background check, 7-day waiting period and such. But then the problem with that is the left never is satisfied. You know what I mean? If you give them any quarter, they're going to go for it all. So it's kind of a paradox, but at the same time, if the Republicans do nothing, right, they make no policy change, and, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the realm of guns. It could be in mental health or whatever. If they do nothing, this is going to be a huge campaign. And a lot of people that are on the moderate right, who probably aren't super pro-gun but aren't really anti-gun, would potentially move to that propaganda and be swayed by it, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think about that.
It's an interesting idea. I think
that's my apprehension with that.
If you guys like, just a guy who's in the chat right now, Top Leaf Media. He's actually a guy I know. We've been talking a little bit, and he's sort of been just, I think, mad libertarian. He was debating you in the chat, eh?
A little bit. I think we were going back and forth a little bit. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good, man. Yourself?
Oh, not bad. It started snowing up here in the Cascades, so that's nice.
Nice. Well, I was just going to say that if he's willing to jump in, he was sort of, I think he was a little bit more gun regulation, so he could kind of come in and sort of had a counter voice to it.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll send him a message, see if he wants to join. If he has everything set up.
Yeah, but I mean, I fundamentally oppose just about all gun regulation. But at some point, you've got to realize that, you know, the people that are like that are probably 20% of the population. And at some point, pragmatically, you've got to look at, you know, how do you keep your rights and how do you somewhat appease these people without actually really infringing on anybody's rights. You know what I mean? Like that's why, like, I feel like if they're going to do anything, the whole like age 21 thing might be the least restrictive, because you're just literally bumping things back 3 years. And the amount of 18-year-olds that can afford to go out and buy a $900 rifle is pretty low. So the amount of people that are affected by that, and obviously you would make exemptions for active military and such, you know, that just makes, you know, logical sense. But something's going to come eventually, and it's like I'm afraid
that that's the funny thing about it is that.
And the problem is, if you don't do anything, then when they do get power, they're going to do a whole lot. You know what I mean? Not to say that they won't even still, but.
Well, here's my question. Okay, so you brought up the veterans. You said active duty. What about those veterans who can't come home with PTSD? They serve their country with a weapon. They come home and take a mental health check, and suddenly they can't own a gun in their own home.
I disagree with that entirely. Yeah, I totally disagree with what they've done with some of the veterans issues. You know what I mean? And like I said, in my personal opinion, right, what I believe ideologically is I oppose pretty much all gun control. I oppose it entirely, and I think that everything would sort itself out. And it's a society issue. We're trying to create this I don't know, this multi-culti, you know, leftist society, but then still trying to have fundamental Americana involved, and it's conflicting right now. You know, I feel like if even if you had zero gun control, and then you allowed, if states actually had allowed people to carry, and you actually had stand your ground laws, the shit would sort itself out pretty quick. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have too many issues.
Well, what do you guys think then? If what can be done to stop mass shootings like these school shootings? What do you think maybe the solution is? I know it's a tough question.
Parenting, discipline. Yeah. It's cultural. It's a cultural issue.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that especially what we saw in this last mass shooting, there is a lack, if not a lack of determination for the proper authorities to actually track these people down. I mean, typically when you hear mass shootings, you hear, oh, this kid, you know, made a vague threat on Twitter, and then, you know, a week or two later, he went out and shot up a school. Well, in this one specific instance, Nicholas Cruz actually made YouTube comments like 6 months ago saying he was going to be a professional school shooter. The guy who owned the YouTube channel actually emailed the FBI, and the school had, you know, made mental health check reports. The police had actually gone out to his home multiple times, and yet he was still able to get away with it. So, I mean, this is one of the very few instances where people actually identify the problem. You know, that's another conversation unto itself. But this is one of the very few times people actually identified the problem and tried to follow through with it, and yet still nothing was done. So that, I have to say that is actually quite aggravating.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the bigger issue is we didn't have these problems.
Well, you know, the FBI was wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have these problems when we were a
Go
You know,
ahead,
pretty much
Tom.
homogenous society when we had, you know, the majority of the population with fundamental Christian values, you know, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. I mean, just that value system within the society has a positive effect on people's behavior. And, you know, we didn't have these issues. The more that we had the welfare state increase, single motherhood rates increase, absent fathers from the families, you know, a lot of this, in my opinion, is what has caused this. You know what I mean? You fundamentally, I think, especially with these young men that are doing this, it's a lack of male role models. It's a lack of male parenting in their lives. And, you know, just because you have a father in your life doesn't mean you're getting the positive male role models. And it's not only that, it's the fact that the complete assault on masculinity in our society. Young boys don't have the outlets that they used to have. They don't have the rites of passage that they used to have. I mean, even now, look at what happened with the Boy Scouts. You used to have one of the few institutions left in the world or in the country where boys had male mentoring and were taught valuable skills and valuable morals and et cetera. And then now it's, well, we're going to let girls in that too. And it's, you're basically just ripping out any masculine identity out of the society, and you're creating a bunch of pissed off, angry boys. And that's what's happening, in my opinion.
Well, I think a practical way that we can actually stop school shootings, at least, is remove the gun-free zone. You open it up to where a teacher can conceal carry, and you don't know who's carrying in that school. It's no longer a soft target. Now you're actually, if you're going to do that, if you're going to be a psycho, now somebody might stop you right then and there with a gun, and you would know that.
Now, do you open that up to specific? Now, do you open that up to specific people, like specific teachers, or would it be every teacher in general can do a conceal and carry?
Right. To get your concealed carry permit, you have to actually go through a course. You have to go to the sheriff's department and register. So if you do all that and you're a teacher, I think you should be able to carry your gun at work.
Okay, so it would kind of then be specific as long as they're willing to put in the effort and go through the process. Then okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and I don't think it should be what I'm going to say next. I don't think should be mandatory, but I would recommend with what he's talking about, what school systems should probably do is then the school system itself should provide additional training to teachers on, shooting situations within a school, right? You know what I mean? It's going to be a little different in a classroom full of people than if you're just on the street and somebody tries to, I don't know, rob you or whatever. So even having additional training specifically for teachers and what to do in those situations while armed, getting the kids in a corner behind you so you're not crossfire, you know what I mean? Stuff like that would be recommended. And I think like he makes a legitimate argument, and it's kind of like goes back to the old joke that you never had a mass shooting at a gun show. People seek out places where they will not have anybody coming back against them and coming and defensively fighting. So they want to seek out easy victims and easy targets. And that's what every single one of these shootings has been done in. And the only one where they tried was the two Muslims that tried to go in and shoot up the Draw Muhammad contest. And they didn't even make it in the front door before they were dead. So it's just it makes sense. People make that argument like, yeah, we shouldn't even have to have this. But I mean, unless you're going to restructure all of society and figure out what the hell is wrong with individuals today and why this is actually happening and why it didn't happen before. I mean, we've always had guns in this country in mass numbers. It never happened like in this kind of rate of frequency. So unless you're going to actually break down the social, societal, and cultural issues and really reconstruct that, you're not going to change it. So the only option really is to act defensively. Because like I said, even if you ban guns tomorrow, ban gun sales tomorrow, you're not going to get rid of them. You're never going to get them all. You know what I mean? And in fact, you're just going to bring a war on.
Well, in fact, one thing I remember hearing was that during World War II, one thing that Japan... You're breaking up a bit. Hey, Tom,
you're talking about the Japanese general.
Yeah, he said that he was worried about invading America, the landmass, because there was so many guns there. I think his quote was there would be a gun behind every blade of grass.
Yeah.
And that is an advantage you have for sure, because you don't just have the strong military, but you also have the individual citizens. What do they call them? The largest unofficial army in the world.
Yeah, if you look at the actual statistics on the United States, the most heavily armed force on the planet is right-wing Americans. Like Republican Americans are the most heavily armed demographic on the entire planet, even more so than the Chinese army.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's true, eh? Yo, Top Leaf, so you were in the chat. You were kind of, I guess you were kind of debating against the Mad Libertarian a little bit. Did you want to put your point forward?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm from Canada, right? And there's seldom any mass shootings here. I can't remember the last time we had a mass shooting. I just looked up some quick statistics on gun violence in Canada, and over the past 5 years, sorry, there's been less than 1,000, I believe. So, and obviously you can chalk that up a bit to population density and what have you. But there's, I think, 37 million people in Canada, and there's 360 million in the States right now. So that's a 10-to-1 ratio. And what we're seeing here is the ratio to gun violence in the States is, I'm talking homicides, not the suicide rates or just gun violence in general, right? Because I know that's a big conflation that always gets mixed up. But homicide rates, it's far more than 10-to-1 to the States to Canada. And I think that some sort of regulation in, well, basic gun control can be helpful, because in Canada here, I got my license to own and operate a firearm when I was 12. Like it's really easy to do. You can do it quite easily. So it's, I don't know, it's, from what I understand, there's a bit more you have to go through in Canada to get a firearm, but it's still quite easy to do. And then it's like an extra course if you want to get a restricted, which I believe is a semi-auto or handgun here. So
what you're completely forgetting is that in the United States, 48% of all homicides are committed by 6% of the population. It's a demographic issue we have here that you do not have. You don't have that issue. You don't have the inner city young black male issue at the capacity that we do, right? And I'm not trying to say that to be like defamatory, but that's the truth. 48% of all homicides are committed by less than 6% of the population here. If you just removed that segment of our population, our gun rate or our homicide rates would be one of the lowest in the world per capita. It's that one subset of the population that is causing our rates to look the way that they do. And almost none of those people within that, a large portion within that demographic are not purchasing their guns legally. I mean, Baltimore City, for one, has one of the highest murder rates per capita in the country, and we have some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country. Chicago is another one, has the highest shooting rate with 3,000 people shot last year, and they have incredibly strict gun control laws within Chicago. It's a demographic and it's a social cultural issue more as a gun issue. That's what I'm stating. It has nothing to do with the controls. And but the people that we're talking about that are committing these crimes, they're not going to follow those laws anyway, right? So we can implement all of these gun licenses and gun licensing practices and renewing the only people that are going to comply with that are the people who are already legally law abiding right now. That's not going to change. The overall homicide rate argument, when people use it against other countries, is invalid because you don't have that same problem. It's a totally different issue here. It's a gang culture issue that Canada just frankly doesn't have.
Okay, so you said a lot there, so I'll try and unpack all the points you made. I would really disagree with what you said about the gang influence in the States. Where I live in Vancouver. There's tons of gangs. There's the Red Scorpions, there's the Surrey Jacks, there's lots of gangs, but we don't see this gang violence kind of permeate out into everyday life. It's not super violent where we're seeing people gunned down in the streets, which I shouldn't say that. I guess a couple weeks ago, some young kid got hit by a stray bullet, but it doesn't happen up here the way it does down there. And you mentioned saying that Chicago has very, very stringent gun laws, right? I don't really see how effective that would be if in the next state over you can just easily get an AR-15. I know AR-15s aren't generally used in gang warfare. It's more handguns, right? But I don't see how effective legislating gun control just on a state level would be if you can just bring a gun over.
let's take that a step outward. So we control guns within the United States. Now, what do you do when the next country over has completely open access to our country and is now arming strictly the gangs themselves? Because that's exactly what would happen if you took the gun industry's sales and the gun industry's control of firearms out of this country. The Mexican cartel would actually take that over. And now you've created even a bigger problem. That's an issue that a lot of countries don't have. You don't have that either, other than us. And we have far more strict regulations, international control regulations. And the Canadian-American border is not the same issue that the American-Mexican border is. And that's a fundamental issue that you're going to have. And like I stated, like you're talking about gangs in Canada, you have a completely different demographic makeup in Canada. It's not the same issue. Your gangs are not like our gangs. Your gangs are not like the Latin Kings. They're not like the Crips. They're not like the Bloods or the Black Guerrilla family. They're not like these Mexican cartel influence gangs. It's a totally different environment. You're talking a strictly different cultural environment. And until you've actually lived in and around that inner city gang mentality in America, you probably wouldn't see the cultural lack of respect of life. There is no respect of life. It's very different.
Well,
sure, build the wall.
I just want to bring up also, what stricter gun laws do you want? We already have background checks. You know, it's not the law's fault if somebody goes in and buys the gun and then gives it to their friend who couldn't pass the background check. That's the person that bought the gun is breaking the law by doing that. But
that could happen in Canada as well. You could get your little gun license, you can go buy the gun, then you give it to a buddy. But also, like, you can legally own VZ58s. I mean, a VZ58 is an AK-47 that uses a different magazine. So you have assault weapons in Canada as well, and you don't have the same problems that we do. And one can make an argument, an actually very strong argument, that a VZ58 is a more effective killing weapon than an AR-15. It's a larger caliber bullet at a higher pressure. I mean, it's not in a significantly same rate of fire, but you don't have the issue of assault weapons or people going in and shooting up schools with semi-automatic rifles, even though you have full access to them as well.
Okay, so I think we should make a distinct difference here between everyday gun violence and mass shootings. Is that fair? Because on one hand, you're saying that a lot of this everyday gun violence is caused by inner city kids, whereas who are overwhelmingly African American, right?
Correct.
But then if you look at mass shootings, it's not inner city kids, right? It's they're more middle class. They tend to be either white or more often Asian than black. So I think if we're talking demographics, I think it's important to put a distinction between everyday homicides and
no, absolutely. I was just bringing that up because you were bringing up the overall homicide rates. And when you're talking about overall homicide rates in America versus Canada, you can't ignore the demographic difference. But yeah, strictly mass shootings, 100%. Yeah, it's generally in recent history, it's usually white or Hispanic or Asian. More often than not, white and Hispanic seems to be the primary role in that. But a big problem that you run into in the United States too is classification of mass shooting. The United States classifies a mass shooting as anybody that is hit, 4 or more people hit with a bullet. So even a lot of our mass shooting statistics are inner city gun crime. If there's a drive-by shooting where 4 people get hit with a bullet, that's considered a mass shooting. And it's school shootings as well. If anything happens, any shooting whatsoever takes place on school grounds, that's considered a school shooting. There was a case, I'm not sure where it was, but it was 2 adult males got in a shootout after school hours. Like, these were people that were not attendants of the school, just on the school property. It was in some city. It was classified as a school shooting. So when you look at these numbers where they state like, oh, there's 18, and I'm not saying I understand what your argument is that, yeah, you guys don't have 17 dead kids because somebody went into a school with a rifle. I understand that. And that's goes back to my more cultural issue, that America has this complete cultural breakdown that we're going through right now. And it's a fundamental breakdown of values. And I think Canada
How
is
so?
as well.
Can you elaborate on that?
Excuse me?
I'm not disagreeing. I just want some elaboration. Could you please elaborate on the breakdown of cultural issues? I'm not disagreeing with you, but I just want to hear your stance on it.
Within the United States, we never had these issues prior to the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and what you saw.
So were there no mass shootings whatsoever prior to the 1960s and 70s?
The biggest mass shooting, school shooting, was Texas University, where the guy sat in a bell tower with a bolt action and shot, I think it was like 11. I can't remember the exact numbers. You did, but you did not have them at the frequency that we do now. And you
how is that relative to population increase? Because I would assume that if your population has like almost doubled in that time. So
yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. It's a very valid point. So
I'd be interested to find out what the rates per population are.
That is shooting. I was typing. That is interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure what the correlation between that would be as far as what the statistics back then versus now with the populations. But as far as I know, they did not happen frequently back then. But that could be because of population as well. I do not have the answer to
that. Well, one thing I find about the gun control debate is, I find that a lot of times it is mental health. These people who end up doing these shootings, they have a lot of mental issues that go unaddressed. So that's one of the problems. But one of the other things is, I think it was a few years ago, and I think it was Moncton, Ontario. Maybe you remember this, Top Leaf. There was about 4 RCMP officers, and that's the equivalent to in America to the FBI. They were shot and killed by a gunman in a.
Oh, is this the Scalise?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that the Mounties had is that they were unequipped for the battle because they went in. They only had their sidearms, their pistols, but he was using a high-powered rifle, so they couldn't shoot him from the same range. So I think in the end, about 4 Mounties ended up getting killed. So I do want something to be done about the mass shooting problem, but I think as long as the people who are going to commit the mass shooting have access to the high-powered rifles, I don't think the gun control will necessarily work just for that reason. It's that if they can still get their guns underground, then the rest of us are sitting at a disadvantage because of it. But I do understand what you're saying, Top Leaf. There is definitely a difference. I've looked up the stats too sometimes between America and Canada, and it can look very disparaging sometimes. But that's more, in my opinion, why I stand on the more I'm willing to give people their guns, because I feel that more people are better at defending themselves. But on one thing I am curious from both sides is, let's take a situation sort of like Las Vegas, where people were not looking at the guns themselves, but they were looking at the bump stock and the Hellfire triggers. What are your guys' opinions about those sort of bans when the government tries to do that?
I mean, I oppose them. I mean,
specifically, the bump stock is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Immediately after the Vegas shooting, I went on a live stream on my channel. And I pulled up a video, literally, you could do it with your belt loop. You put your finger through the belt loop and put the gun right there, and you shoot once, and it bounces your finger back and forth. You don't need a bump stock. You need a pair of pants.
I've been bump firing rifles for 10 years prior to a bump stock ever being created. I mean, it's not, you can do it even without a belt loop. If you know how to hold a rifle correctly and to be able to place it off of your shoulder, it's not very hard at all to bump fire a rifle. It's a novelty item. It's not something any serious person uses. And in that situation, I mean, we can argue a lot about that Vegas shooting. I'm not hardcore on the conspiracy end of it, but I definitely don't necessarily totally believe the official story on that. I definitely think there was more than one person involved. Nevertheless, I mean, at what point do you say enough is enough, right? Do you either have to have a full out gun ban or none at all? It doesn't make a difference, because you're arguing that a high powered rifle makes a mass shooting more easy. That I disagree entirely. I think a mass shooting is far more effective and easy with 2 handguns. I mean, you literally can move through the crowd better. You can fire faster and more bullets at the same time, which is wielding 2 9mm handguns. It actually will leave a bigger penetration and exit wound in the person than a 223 will. It's just a fact, in my opinion, that people, especially these younger kids, they grow up playing Call of Duty. They kind of glorify these types of rifles. They look cool. They look neat. They see them in movies. So it's kind of what they want to use. But if we're talking straight up effectiveness of what is going to kill the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time in a small confined area, just wielding 4 pistols would be the easiest way to do it.
Hey, any chance? Do you know what was used in the Bataclan attack?
In the what?
The Bataclan attack in Paris 3 years ago, where they shot up that
Charlie Hebdo.
Charlie Hebdo.
No. This was like the concert.
Oh, like 150 dead or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I'm not sure.
Usually with them, I think it was AK-47s, because generally, like fully autos, they get them. Most of them are coming from the Middle East. I know with the Charlie Hebdo, it was the 2 guys used full auto AK-47s.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because it was a ridiculously high amount of people killed. So I want to just see what they were using.
Yeah, but like in a school shooting scenario, I mean, I can tell you straight up now, if I had to go into close quarter combat, right, a small area, clearing a house or clearing a building, a full length 16 to 20 inch barreled AR-15 is not at all what I would use. It's just it's too long. It's too easy to get taken away from you by someone in a close quarter. I mean, obviously a pistol or a small, like a Scorpion or an SBR would be the way to go. So it's just, to me, it's an irrational argument, because if you get rid of the AR-15s, right, let's get rid of them. Let's ban them all together. Well, then what are you going to do when kids come in with 2 or 4 pistols and start doing the same thing? What are you going to do when a kid, and then we'll get rid of the pistols, right? Let's get rid of the pistols. Then what are you going to do when they figure out how to make dragon's breath at home and load their own shot shells with magnesium phosphates and start blasting crowds of people with flaming, shotgun shells? What are you going to do then? You're going to ban shotguns too? I mean, how far down the road do you go? And then we get rid of the shotguns, and then the kids figure out how to go online and make a pipe bomb out of some chemicals and such that they found at Home Depot. Like, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, you're going to find a way to kill mass amounts of people. It's not that difficult to do.
I was about to say, I've been on YouTube long enough. I can literally, I'm not even kidding you, make a gun out of PVC pipe. And then
you can make a shotgun out of 3/4 inch rigid pipe and a 1 inch piece of rigid pipe. You can make a 1-shot shotgun.
Oh shit, no way.
Yeah, just some rigid pipe.
Although,
so then the argument becomes an access to ammunition. That becomes the next argument. And then we got to control the ammunition. It's like California now, or New York, one of them's trying to regulate people to like 30 rounds every 30 days. Like, I mean, shit, somebody like me who goes shooting, it's nothing for me to go through 500-600 rounds in a day. I mean, just target shooting. It's a slope. It's a slope, because the laws that you're proposing aren't actually going to work, because people are just going to use a different style weapon, and then you're going to go after that one, and then what's next? That's why I say you have access in Canada to the exact same firearms capabilities, right? We'll put it that way. You have access to guns that we do, but like I said, the 58 is relatively identical to AK-47, and you don't have the same problems. I mean, so to me that stems as a cultural or a societal issue more so than a issue of mechanical tools.
So how do we fix the culture then?
Oh, God, that's a tough one. If I knew the answer to that, man, I wouldn't be talking to you guys. That's for sure. I think it's definitely a fundamental fixing the family, man. I mean, you look at the amount of single motherhood rates within, I think it just came out within the Black community in America, single motherhood rates are at 77.1%.
No, higher than that, man. Yeah. Higher than that.
Higher.
Yeah.
That's all.
Stephen Molyneux did a great video with Reverend Jordan
Peterson.
Jesse Peterson. That's it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when you have a society, and we know for a fact that a lack of a father in the home increases a propensity for violence and increases a propensity for crime. And then you're seeing even now, even within white America, you're seeing the rates in the mid 30% and growing. So this is correlating directly with these breakdowns of the family. You have a breakdown of fundamental religious moral values, and not to say that you need to be religious to have morals. We all know that, whatever. But I think that when you have a society and a culture that is focused around, Western Christian values, there is less room, so to speak, for kind of degenerate behavior and breakdowns. Parents are more involved. You just have a better cultural fabric. And as we've seen that the left completely destroyed that segment and that culture in America, you're starting to see these issues happen. You don't, and again, you watch these shootings and such, very rarely are they coming out of, hardcore traditionalist communities. You know what I mean? You're looking at this one happened outside of Miami, a very left-wing area of Florida. They're not happening in Tallahassee. You know what I mean? They're not happening in Alabama, in very conservative Christian areas. So it to me, the only logical thing, if you want to talk about what the cause is, the root cause to me has to be cultural and societal, beyond anything. And obviously,
fair enough. And the main point I want to make with the difference between Canadian gun laws and American gun laws is just there's more entrance requirements to acquire a firearm in Canada, and it's not hard. It's not difficult at all. But you can't simply just. Well, what is it in the States? Like, do you guys have any restrictions to just?
Oh yeah. So when
let's say 22.
Yes, when you go fill out a form 4473, there's a series of questions. You cannot be a felon of any kind. You cannot have a crime. You cannot even have been convicted of a crime that has a sentence of more than imprisonment of more than, I think, 1 or 2 years. It actually, even using marijuana, if you actually tell the truth on your form, restricts you from owning a firearm. And of course, if they find out you lied on that form, they can then charge you with a felony of lying to the FBI. You cannot have ever been institutionalized for more than 30 days. So the only reason it's that is it allows for people that have gone obviously like through rehab or something like that when they were 19. So any 30 days or more of, and that's even, I think it might be even voluntary. If you voluntarily go and do any kind of treatment for more than 30 days, you're restricted from buying a firearm. I mean, it's a very restricted part of the population. However, like with this kid, what you're dealing with was he was 19. So there's a little less time frame in which, he could have racked up an adult criminal charge, so to speak. So maybe an argument there is, do you hold juvenile records to any kind of real credibility? I mean, that's a slippery slope too.
Yeah. Well, and if I'm not mistaken, his mother had just died and he was undergoing some kind of depression. And on top of that, apparently demons told him to do it. So, I mean, this is clearly someone who didn't have access to some kind of mental health facility at any longevity.
Yeah, and I mean, this kid's a bad example.
He was a bad apple.
Well, this kid's a bad example because people did the right thing. The FBI dropped the ball. The local police dropped the ball. If the institutions that are supposed to be looking out for the crazy people with guns would have actually done their job, this probably wouldn't have happened. Which further proves the whole, argument that, the warning signs were there. Everybody did what they were supposed to do, except the police institutions. They didn't do their job. So what do you do about that? You know what I mean? Where do you go with that?
The police were called out to his house one year, I believe 10 or 15 times on a domestic violence dispute. He was arguing with his grandmother or something. So any guns that he did have, they should have been taken away on those grounds, I think.
Yeah, because that's a big one. Domestic violence is another thing. Any domestic violence, like literally, if you spit on your wife and she calls the cops and you get charged, that you're restricted from ever owning a firearm for the rest of your life. I mean, people have this idea in America, you just walk up to a store, up to a desk and you walk out with a rifle. It doesn't really work like that. You know what I mean? It's a little different, especially via what state you're in. Of course, the state I'm in requires a 7-day waiting period for a handgun or a regulated firearm. If you want to buy a handgun, you go in, you fill your paperwork out, you pay for it, you fill out the federal paperwork, and then Maryland has its own, I think it's a Form 7 or whatever, which is a little more extensive, goes into a little more detail that the Maryland State Police then take. They run their own background check separate away from the FBI, and then they approve you after 7 days, and then you can pick it up. Yeah, I mean,
I'm so glad I live in Oregon. Oh, man.
No. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Dude, stripped AR-15 lowers were 7-day waiting periods. A stripped lower. And, I don't know.
Yeah, it's same here in California. It's like 2-week waitings.
So can I just float something by you guys here? I'm not saying ban AR-15s or semi-automatic rifles, but just having a requirement before you are able to get a gun to have a mandatory training course to be able to prove that you know what the difference between, like, because you heard like I don't know if you guys seen this, but Don Lemon talking about semi-automatic assault rifles, as he says, and he couldn't properly define it. But being able to properly define different types of guns, being able to pass a safety course, and just having knowledge of guns before you're being able to buy them. That's how it is here in Canada, and there's just it's a short 1-day course you can take.
Yeah,
but
I struggle with this one on multiple fronts. So someone like me who grew up around guns, right? I was taught by my father at a young age, you never point, the basic safety rules, the stuff that you're taught, you don't ever point at something you're not intending to kill or destroy, this, that, and the other, how to properly use firearms. So in that argument, why should I have to go take some government training course that isn't going to provide me with, it's probably going to provide me with less knowledge than I already have. Secondly, there becomes an issue of now the state is restricting the Second Amendment, but I understand where you're coming from. And I don't necessarily think that it's a bad idea. Like, to be honest, there are a lot of people, and I see people come into gun shops that I'm like, does this guy really know what the fuck he's doing? You know what I mean? Like, I get
so
that,
why should we take a chance with that then?
Yeah, I get that because fundamentally,
I get where you're coming from. You grew up around guns, and you said you were properly trained by your father. But what about the people who aren't? I think there should be, it's like a driver's license. You should be able to prove you know what you're doing and you know the safety requirements. I think there should be some sort of background check. I'm not saying background checks like you guys have now, but just some sort of licensing that shows you know what you're doing.
We have that here in this state with handguns. So if you want to go buy a handgun, and this is the only disagreement I have, right? And I'll tell you, if you want to provide that, right, you want people to go through that course, then you need to make the state pay for it. That's my opinion, right? That the state should have to provide that training free of cost. It should not be passed on to the citizen, because then you're basically saying that this constitutional right now comes with a charge. A driver's license is not a constitutional right. It is a state. It's a right within the state to use the highways that they provide. Correct. Now in Maryland, what they did was you have to file for an HQ, a handgun qualification license. You have to submit fingerprints, photo ID. You have to go through, I think, a 4-hour training course. And then you send all that in, you get this cute little ID that allows you to buy handguns. Now, what they did that was, I guess, positive. I don't like that law because now you have to pay as the individual. You're paying $500 to $600 before you can even buy your first handgun, right? So that's a problem. But what they did was allowed anybody who had owned handguns previously or owned a regulated firearm or even had gone through a hunter safety course, you can use that as the exemption for your training. So in that instance, they did, I guess, they thought about it a little bit and allowed people, because that was originally they weren't going to do that. So it's like somebody who is a handgun collector and has 20 handguns. Why the hell does this guy got to go through a training course? It doesn't make any logical sense. But I mean, I can see what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think it should be at the state level. State should regulate that, not the federal government. And then on top of that, then the state itself needs to pay for that. You should not pass that upon the citizen if you're going to go and make these extra requirements to exercise your constitutional rights.
Well, like here in Oregon is an open carry state, so I can go to the pawn shop or the gun shop and buy a pistol. I don't need to take a course. I could walk out of it with it on my hip in plain view. That's just how Oregon is. Now, if I want to conceal the pistol, I have to take a course, and I have to go apply at the sheriff's department and do all that for my concealed carry permit. But Oregon is open carry. I could have a gun rack in my truck. I could have a pistol on my hip, and
you guys have really low crime rates in the United States. Very low crime rates.
Yeah, other than Portland, where it's a little bit harder to get a gun up in the Portland area. Not as many gun stores, Maybe your idea would work, Top Leaf, if you did it to maybe the inner cities, and you were like, hey, you guys don't really go shooting. You don't live out in the woods. How about we give you a course? But everybody in rural America, I first shot a gun at 8 years old, and the first gun I shot was an AR-15. Okay, so why should I have to go take a course?
I started shooting BB guns when I was like 5. Then I think I hit a 22 at like 6 or 7, and then I was shooting, 12 gauge or 20 gauge shotguns deer hunting when I was 10, 11. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, and that's a problem too with America specifically, is how fractionalized we are culturally with inner cities, suburbans, and rural areas. There's totally different ways of life and standards of living within all of those different communities.
Well, the other thing too, when we're talking about guns that a lot of people don't want to talk about, is that guns are actually, especially for women, are the perfect equalizers. Considering how men are born stronger than women, they are at that disadvantage. But if a woman has a gun on her, she doesn't really have to worry about being robbed, being raped, going home late at night, because I know those are a lot of concerns for women. But when you have that gun right there in your purse, she doesn't have to worry about having to fight off that 250-pound gym jockey because she's got that gun right there. So that's one thing I find that, especially when the left is talking about guns, they leave out, because they're the ones usually talking about women's rights and like keeping women safe. Well, that's one perfect way to keep women safe.
Wait a second, Adrian. Are you saying there's biological differences between the sexes?
Yes, I am.
I don't know, man. I can't get behind that. I might need to report you to the Ontario Human Rights Board here.
You Jordan Peterson acolyte, you.
Oh, yeah. Hey, he's one of my inspirations for even starting.
Yeah, he's great.
I'm actually reading his book right now. I was reading it.
Yeah, I just picked it up. I picked it up on the day it came out, and I went to the bookstore fairly early in the day, and the checkout lady was like, "Oh yeah, you're like the 20th person to buy this book today." I'm like, "Oh fuck yeah, right."
All right, AC, you've been out for a little bit. Why don't you put your opinion forward?
Can you guys hear me even?
No.
Hearing you better.
Your volume's a little low, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I came in just in time to hear that women and women not being, equally. But I was gonna say that I mean, all of us are like conservative or libertarians, so we're not leftist here. I don't know, maybe I guess Top Leaf might be, but the rest of us aren't.
No, so. I'm minarchist and cap.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you guys are still talking about the shooting. One of the things I found really interesting, though, is that I happened to look up the town, and I saw that the demographics, the average household income, and I don't know if any YouTubers or news outlets have picked up on this and highlighted this fact, but the average household income in that area is really high. It was like 277,000 and change.
Wow. Holy crap.
And Sandy Hook was like 100, I don't know, it was over 100.
But a lot of that too, you got to remember that's a suburb of Miami, so you're probably going to have like it's almost like when you look at the DC suburbs, right? If you look at the average incomes in Montgomery County, they're ridiculously high for the state, but it's very, very misleading because you have people that are on the majority, or not majority, but a very large portion on welfare. But then you have the DC elites that live in Montgomery County that are making millions a year. So you get that weird offset. So sometimes when you're looking strictly, especially outside of major cities, you got to be careful how you look at that. I'm not saying that your stats are inaccurate, but
still, obviously, this was a more affluent suburb because I know when the thing with Sandy Hook went down, and I saw that the household income was really high. I looked up where I grew up, and it was also like 120 per family. But I had always heard that I was living in a rich school district, which, I mean, I knew the kids I went to school with, like, their parents were doctors and lawyers and CEOs. But I had always heard another suburb was, like, also a rich suburb. And I looked that one up, and it was really low. And I looked up every suburb from where I grew up that was supposed to be really low. And, I mean, most of these, even the Hamptons, was lower. Like, I looked up all these places that I expected to be high. So for a township to have an average income like that, I think that that's pretty high. By 40. Oh, he already left. But
What
if
did
you
40
guys
say
hadn't
there?
already changed topics. No, he left. I was like saying bye, and he like I saw his thing. It actually like dropped down on the screen. It was kind of interesting. I've never noticed people leaving before, but I don't know if you guys had changed topics or not. But if not, maybe we want to move
No, we
on
were
to
pretty
other
much on.
topics. Because
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we can move on for sure.
I don't know what else is in the news. Oh, the thing with the powder was another thing in the news this week.
That was a little bit not what was kind of bugged me about that was it's bad enough that she got sent the powder because it turned out to be, I think, cornstarch, so at least it was nothing bad. But what was bad about that was a lot of people online were making jokes at her expense, like whether it was like screw her or whatever, haha, I'm glad this happened to her. It was actually a little disturbing because she's just the wife of the son of the president, you know? So she doesn't really have any connection to the politics, yet people were so willing to throw her under the bus and make these jokes when, for all we know, that could have been anthrax.
And that's not even like Lara Trump actually does she has like a YouTube channel or something. She does like news online like the rest of us do. Well, I don't really do news. I usually do topics, but like most of us do. She calls it like Trump news. Lara does that, but I don't think Vanessa does. So yeah, she's even less tied to the president than the other daughter-in-law. But I don't know. It was probably meant for Don Jr. because Don Jr. comments more than his brother online, I think.
Yeah, I think it was actually addressed to him. It was addressed to him, but she opened it.
It's just I can't imagine. I mean, if that had happened to me, my wife opens my mail. It happens all the time. So I just can't imagine if somebody say had done that to me and she was the one who got that. That's just horrifying.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, of course the media can laugh about it because it's someone on the right. I mean, that's the argument. I mean, people always say they want you dead, and you kind of see these things, the truth in those statements when things like this happen.
Well, the thing is too is she would have been well aware of the early 2000s, the anthrax attacks that were going on. I think it was like 2004 or something like that, maybe 2003.
After 9/11 it happened. It was before that. It was like probably 2002.
Okay, so I was like 9 at the time, so I don't really remember that, but she remembered that pretty damn well. So that would be super scary for her to open that and just a bunch of white powder to fall out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But what is it though? Like, why is it all of a sudden? Is it these far lefties or is it everybody now on the left that just thinks it's okay to joke about something like that?
I think it's the millennial leftists.
Ugh, my generation.
Yeah.
I just think that we're so fractionalized as a country and we're so opposed that we just don't value each other anymore. And, I agree with a lot of like more farther right than me commentators when they state that there's no fixing that. We are literally at the point where we hate each other. And I feel that way too. I mean, I'm straight. I'll tell you, I do not associate with people on the left. I don't have friends that are on the left. I've completely cut those people out of my life because, my argument has always been if somebody advocates for a theft from me and for disarmament, basically advocating for me to be a victim and robbed, I have no business having that type of person in my life. And unfortunately, I think we're at this point in this country where our ideologies are so far apart that we can't see eye to eye anymore. And we actually see each other as enemies. And that's
do you really think? I was just going to say, do you think this will go down to civil war like a lot of people are saying?
I don't think so. I don't think it'll actually get that far. Yeah, and if take this with a grain of salt, there was allegedly this leaked document or something that came out. No one's ever been able to verify it, but it's called like the Red Team Planner, or if you can look it up. And it was allegedly this like military document or something. And they even stated that they did not want a civil war in this country. A lot of people argue that, oh, they're pushing for a civil war. And it's like, they really don't want a civil war because you can't manage it. You know what I mean? And then foreign governments will get involved because the U.S. military can't manage it. They'll fractionalize themselves. We're so spread out across the world. You know, you'll have people within our own military picking sides. I don't think it will ever go that far to a massive breakdown civil war. I just think that the culture will continue to break down. You know, because of this fact that we all hate each other, we don't see eye to eye, we have no middle ground. Everybody kind of starts doing their own thing. You become the enemy, you become the enemy. There's no unity, and just slowly everything breaks down. The economy breaks down, the society, it begins to demoralize itself, and you just slowly kind of move into second and third world conditions. I don't know that you're ever going to see an all-out war, because who's going to win it? I mean, the right wing would win in 30 minutes. I mean, it would just be over.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even be a civil war. It would be one solid attack and it would be over. That's my opinion.
Oh, okay. Piper said he had to go out, but he might be back later.
I know. I was like, I was gonna say bye to him when Tom finished talking, but he was already gone.
Ah, shit. Oh well. So right now we're also hearing a lot more about Mueller. Oh, Tom went too.
Yeah, but he didn't tell us he was going, so maybe he like dropped his connection or something.
Yeah, maybe then. All right then. So
Top Leaf is going. Bye, Top Leaf.
What? No, I was just saying bye to everyone that left.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
If they come back, they can't see the side chat.
I was going to say we went from like 7 all the way down to 3 all of a sudden.
I can put it on Discord.
There he is.
Yeah, I froze. I had to refresh.
Fair enough.
I figured.
We thought you just didn't like us anymore.
No. Thought you were one of those lefties I cut out of my life.
Well, I do want you to be a victim, so. So is anybody, I haven't had much chance to look too much into it, but what was this about Mueller and the 13 Russians that were indicted?
I don't know.
Oh,
nobody looked into it?
Yeah, so basically I don't want to be the only one talking. I feel like I'm running the conversation. But it was essentially what these, you don't know about this, AC? You could tell them. You got to know about this. Shit.
From what I understand, the 13 Russians were pretty much individuals who paid for Facebook ads and created bot accounts to try and somewhat influence the election. I don't see how 13 individuals, even with 1,000 bots apiece, could really influence anything. The United States is so vast. Good luck.
They were part of like a big corporations within or institutions within Russia. It was like at one point, I think these 13 people had like $1.5 million a month budgets that they were using to fund Facebook. But they were also one of the things that they very little bit tell you is that they were actually funding Bernie too. They were basically pushing for Bernie and pushing for Trump. And then once Hillary won or stole the Democratic primary, they were pushing Trump the whole way. And oddly enough, one of the big things that came out in the Rosenstein when he was actually like up on the podium talking for the press conference was that on the exact same day in New York, this group funded a pro-Trump rally and a not my president rally on the same day, which is just the argument that I think most people have been stating all along. Any Russian influence was strictly to just cause conflict between American people, between the people, sow dissent, and then create this whole thing. You know what I mean? And it worked beautifully. They were smart. Look at this. I mean, we spent over a year going on about this Russia bullshit, and it was completely. Was the plan. The plan was to create and disrupt, the incoming president, and it worked, and they fell right for it. And it's just and basically they came out and Rosenstein stated that no Americans knowingly communicated with these people. They did communicate with Americans, but everybody that communicated with them assumed that they were American citizens as well. Nobody actually knew they were Russians and collaborated with them. So it was kind of vindicating, I guess, in a way. And they were coming out saying that they communicated with somebody within the Trump campaign, And I don't know how true this is, but a report that I read was it was something like some guy from some grassroots organization that was somehow loosely associated with the Trump. It wasn't even like it was somebody major in the campaign.
Wow. I remember seeing, I think it was today, I saw a picture of what you were talking about, I did hear about the two rallies that were funded on the same day. And the one that was for anti-Trump, actually, Michael Moore was at it.
Oh my God. Mr. Russia collusion himself, huh?
Pretty much, eh?
Yeah.
You were going to say, AC?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think is interesting about this Russian narrative is they keep acting like Russia was trying to like influence our election, but everybody knows everywhere you looked during the election cycle, every time I turned around, I was being bombarded with pro-Hillary stuff and, you know, pro-immigration stuff and all of this stuff pro the left. And I know on Yahoo, before Trump even announced, so I think it might have been summer of 2014, or he announced in 2015, right? Summer of 2015 he announced. Or maybe it was like spring of 2015. Before he even announced, it was like at least a month before he announced, maybe even the summer before. A lot of people, I would check my Yahoo mail and they would constantly be pushing out this stuff like, oh, these people are getting sent home. It's so sad. Families are getting broken up. We have to like push for all these illegals to get citizenship. And everyone in the comments was constantly railing against it. And at one point, it's like every time they put this out, people would get in the comments and they would be like, whoever is the strongest on immigration is who we have to vote for. So it's like Americans were already primed for Trump's message. And here they're acting like, you know, they're acting like somehow we were influenced, and they tried so hard to influence us in the opposite direction. But we didn't want it. It's ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense.
I thought a report came out a while ago, like a year ago or so, saying that the Russians, there were Russian bots funding pro-Hillary stuff as well.
Well, it seems to me
I've heard this.
It seems to me that it would make more sense that they would fund the left than the right, because not saying that Bernie actually had any collusion, but Bernie has been a socialist for decades, and that was including during the time when Soviet Russia was around. So it seems to me that Bernie and the more left wing would hold a lot more of what Russia believed in, rather than Trump and the right.
Russia doesn't like Jews, and Bernie's a Jew.
That would do it.
So,
huh?
I mean, I know that because that's one of the reasons why Russian Jews are all going to Israel and coming to the USA, is because they make it uncomfortable for them. I don't think they like persecute them, but like they don't accommodate them the way they're accommodated in the US and in Israel.
Well, we hear the stories that come out of Russia, so it doesn't really surprise me. It's too bad, though, because it seems like anti-Semitism is on the rise yet again. Like, everywhere I hear now, it's just like these anti-Jewish narratives all over, especially I'm hearing it out of Europe these days.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm Jewish, so I definitely know.
I think I did, yeah. I bet you did, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, people know about like my YouTube channel, and one of the common feedbacks I get from other Jews is, you know, that I'm brave and that we get it from both the left and the right. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't really want to jump in and be too vocal, because if they come in and be vocal to defend like against all the crap the left is doing, people feel like they're gonna get hit with you know, they're going to get hit by the alt-right, which is true. I mean, I get it all the time. Oh, you're just a faker. You're just trying to trick us. You kike. They call me a kike all the time. Gab, I get it really bad, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm more on Minds than Gab, because for me, Gab is, you know, less pleasant.
I can
There's
imagine.
some of it on Minds, but not as Gab is really bad, which you wouldn't
Shit,
notice
I didn't
unless you
realize.
do it. Yeah.
I'm barely on Gab, so I didn't realize.
Well, I don't think anybody would notice unless they were Jewish, because people actually tag me and they say, like, look out for this kike. And, you know, like, I had somebody who came on my YouTube channel. Eventually, I blocked them off my channel because I got sick of it. But they were like, I'm going to make sure the right finds out about you. How dare you try to come into the right? Like, acting. This is one of the things I see the alt-right doing, is they refer to the right when they only mean the alt-right. And it's like, I'm not alt-right. I'm conservative. You know, we as conservatives and libertarians are legitimately on the right. And alt-right is actually arguably not on the right. But I think part of the problem is not everybody defines alt-right the same way. I mean, there could be two people with the exact same scopes politically, and one could call themselves alt-right and the other could call themselves conservative.
Well, now these days, people are calling themselves alt-light too. So, like, it's, I don't know, it seems like people who believe in the alt-right vision, but then just are afraid to call themselves alt-right.
Well, alt-right came up with this, like, term alt-light, and it's supposed to mean, like, the Cernovich types.
So, like, what they see, the pussies of the alt-right, if you want, the cowards of the alt-right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people use that to mean conservatives who are online a lot, but not alt-right. But
yeah, they're called cucks now.
Yeah. I specifically use alt-light to mean generally the people who are all about, like, views and money and, you know, won't get their hands dirty. Like, a lot of the people, I think at least 3 of us know about Red Pill Black, aka Candox. Yeah, that's how I found you, Just My Stupid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I found you back from her, and then I subbed you, and then later on, like, you posted something, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy, he has a small channel. Now that I'm building up this Discord, let me check him out again.
I appreciate you inviting me in.
So.
Yeah, she's a great organizer. She's organized the whole thing practically.
Yeah, well, and Mad Dog and his crowd and Piper, like, I found Piper and then he kind of brought them in as a group, but I think I invited Mad Dog myself, but I found him on one of Piper's streams, so.
Yeah, no, and talking about the alt-right, what makes me mad is people like Christopher Cantwell. He was really great about 3 years ago. And he was a hardcore libertarian. And then the alt-right movement happened, and now suddenly he's a neo-Nazi. And I'm like, holy shit, you used to be cool. What the fuck happened? Like, it's insane how some of these people have just maybe shown their true colors.
Somebody said he told people on a stream that he put, like, drugs up his butt, so I'm not really sure. I don't know if that was, like, how much of that was a rumor, but if that's true, even if he told people that and it wasn't true, I don't know. But a lot of these people who consider themselves alt-right, a lot of them, they feel like, act like the alt-right is the only part of the right. Like a voice chat with mixed right wing on Discord, and these people just sit there and they'll be like, alt right, no, alt right, and you'll be saying all of the right, we have stuff in common, we all care about immigration, we need to work together on that, and they'll just be like, alt right, we got to make everybody alt right.
Yeah, there's definitely a purity spiral. It's just in the political sense on that end, and I'm always trying to be the great mediator between all the factions of the right, because I do believe we need, even though we may disagree on some certain aspects and certain fundamental issues, we have so far to go, especially in this country and even in Canada with some of your new immigration policies and such. There's such a battle ahead of us that the point of arguing between ourselves is just ridiculous. And I've said this before, a socialist will never criticize a communist. You know what I mean? They never will, because they understand that for right now, they have the same fundamental goals. And that's always been the problem of the right, because we're far more ideologically, as far as intellectually dissecting each other's theories and opinions, that we kind of conflict with each other a lot. And there's a lot of things with the alt-right I fundamentally disagree with, but there's a lot of things that I do agree with, as far as immigration and controlling identity politics and such, and waging that aspect of the war and the culture war. So it's I don't ever go out and attack them. And most of them, I feel when you get with the older people get that, you know what I mean? The 20s, 30 somethings, they kind of understand that you do need each other at some point, you know what I mean? But because there is a huge war out there ahead of us, but I think it's that younger, Gen Z crowd that is just brainwashed and just kind of, if you're not a nat sock and you're not ready to gas Jews, I mean, it's almost like you're, blasphemous. I think
that the leaders and YouTubers are a little bit more discreet about it, but a lot of them I think are the same way, because if you look at Tree of Logic has been debating about the whole Jewish question thing, and they're still they're criticizing that. They won't drop this. Now, these kids are getting it from somewhere. Now, you get these leaders, these YouTubers, and they get on a stream arguing with Tree or arguing with me on Twitter, and they'll come out with this, oh no, hashtag not all, oh, we know that not all Jews are like this. Are their minions coming after me and accusing me of being a liar?
Yeah.
Hashtag not all Muslims.
And that's kind of the thing that I argue with. There's
a huge difference between Muslims and Jews, because
I was just making a comparison between the far left and the far right, because they're coming out with saying hashtag not all Jews, and at the same time the far left comes out with the hashtag not all Muslims. So I just mean I'm just making a comparison there.
Well,
there is a big difference. There is a big difference for sure. I agree with you on that.
I mean, 25.
I think where people run down the JQ really, really hard is that, I mean, most people come into that kind of realm through the normal right, the conspiracy right, where, you hear the globalist, the New World Order, the globalist. And then when you do look at it, a lot of them are Jews. You can't deny that fact, right? But I mean, the problem is when you start to focus strictly on that and start to stay away from the fact that it's leftist, communist, socialist kind of stuff. I think it has a lot less to do with Judaism than it does just the communist end of it. And a lot of the stuff that they say as far as historically is true, but it's is it the root cause? You know what I mean? You can say, I mean, let's just, I don't know, all brown dogs bite, or brown dogs bite more than anybody else. Well, is it because they're brown dogs? I mean, is that really why, or is it just that's maybe a shitty example. Or an analogy, but I think it's easy to buy into, and it's easy to find a scapegoat. You know what I mean?
I jump into it, and I start to explain to them that it is specifically a problem, and admit this being Jewish. There is a lot of this stuff goes on with left-wing Judaism does this, and also they left-wing Christians do this to Christians too, but one of the problems is that left-wing Jews start jumping in Jews and telling us we don't agree with them. And I've been fighting back on that one online. Like, recently, somebody who is politically conservative, and he used to have a YouTube channel and a blog, and he became pretty well known. I think he had like 5,000 or 1,000 followers, which is a lot for only being within the Jewish community, especially. He's very, very well known amongst pretty much any Jew who's not like afraid to be online, because you get some who's there's a certain, like, within the anyone who's Orthodox and online, because there's a Orthodox is the most religious, so there's a big chunk of them that won't get online, or they use like filters. They use special, like kitty type filters to make sure they don't accidentally see porn. Because they're afraid, they're afraid of the internet. They're very old fashioned, similar to how like super crazy religious Christians do this kind of stuff. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh, so the ones that are online, everybody like knows who this guy is, and he has a lot of Facebook friends from when he used to do this. And he considers himself conservative, but he posted this thing on his Facebook not too long ago, and it was like, oh, how come Jews aren't nicer to minorities or something? I have it somewhere. I can find it and show everyone the screenshot. So you see all these Jews going, oh, you can see them starting to feel guilty, and others saying like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then one black Jewish girl saw this, so she went and she tagged all of her black Jewish friends, who all of a sudden started jumping in, and like this one girl who is well known to make incredibly horrible decisions started guys like try to like grope her legs on dates and stuff and tell her they can do it because she's black, when in fact this is like a girl who is posted on Facebook like, I accidentally answered my front door. That's so funny. Like, why would you even post that on Facebook? You're supposed to be a religious
I think one of the
chick.
biggest problems for like,
of course, God.
I think one of the biggest problems for like,
yeah, I'm going on a tangent.
Like
I'm
the
sorry.
the average Jewish population is Israel, because I mean, when you actually look at Israel, I mean, it's, they absorb massive amounts of foreign aid. The U.S. basically funds them. They kind of take a lot of territory. I mean, they're kind of fueling the proxy wars in Syria. Again, I think that when somebody comes at you, if you're a young, impressionable person with, the JQ, and you start to look at some of those things, it's easy to buy into. It's easy to look at it, because there's a lot of stuff out there that kind of makes their argument in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you got the Soros types, it's difficult. Like, I don't know how, because I try to look at this logically too myself, because like I said, I float in all circles, where, they do make some arguments and you're kind of like, yeah, there's an argument, but it's intellectually dishonest, because you're lumping in entire genres of people with 6 or 7 elitist globalists. You know what I mean? It's just, it's dumb. But how do you combat that? How do you get somebody to see that, hey, yeah, we understand that there's a lot of people of this, religious or ethnic background that are in charge of media, or in charge of these kind of NGOs that are pushing multiculturalism and such on the Western world. But how do you get them to say, or separate that, you know what I mean? That maybe this isn't just because they're Jewish. Maybe this is a communist infiltration type thing. You know what I mean? It's
saying, communist.
Yeah.
And they try to make it about Israel, which Israel right now is right wing. I don't know how long it's been right wing, but I know that Netanyahu is considered politically right wing, equivalent to like, you know, our conservative, our Republican, like Trump. I'm betting that has a lot to do with the fact that moving to Israel has been pushed in the modern Orthodox communities, yeshivish Orthodox communities, which are substantial, especially Orthodox Jews are vote 70% Republican. It was like 69% Republican that they vote. So when you have that population that is voting Republican here in the United States, they're moving to Israel. These are, you know, people who want more decent nerds. And people tell me like, oh, you know, I started with me, so I even, because a lot of these Jews are like, oh no, are these all right? We're like, no, Jews think this. I found myself like going like, well, maybe I am the only one who thinks like this, you know, because I tend to break rules, so to speak, like social norms.
You're starting to break up again.
Let me.
I think something that's problematic too is the fact that it seems like anytime you bring up a criticism, right, or you bring up, it's like automatically like this anti-Semitic autistic screeching, where it's like you can't ever like have an objective conversation about that question or whatever, or about that influence or whatever. And I think that entrenches people, because if you do bring it up, it's automatically like anti-Semite, neo-Nazi, and it's like that makes people jump even further down that JQ rabbit hole. You know what I mean? Where it's like, well, how come we can talk about the problems with Islam to a certain degree, right? Like people can have these public conversations about it, or you can have public conversations about, you know, the problem with leftism or the problem with right-wing nationalism, or that you can have all these groups. You can talk about white men like they're the devil. But if you just happen to mention that there is some people in this group that are negatively influencing, you know, society or whatever, Western societies, it's like automatically you're the devil, and it's like you're not allowed to have that conversation. And I think that's problematic, because that entrenches people in that thought process. You know what I mean? Instead of being able to just openly talk about it, kind of like we do on here, that I think that's problematic.
I think. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I mean, my big issue is that when I jump in and I try to explain it to these, if I wasn't Jewish, I mean, it's incredibly complicated. Like the difference between, first off, Zionists all the time is like, you know, they think it means like these premises, and somehow it's involved with Israel, when the toxic Jews are the ones on the left. Those are American Jews who are very, very like detached from Israel. Their connection, they've done surveys that I've seen, like, you know, having all these Jewish Facebook friends, people push this stuff out on their channels, and the studies have said that the people who are religiously left, but also politically left, the communists are something called Reform Jews. And that's the most leftist before you get to secular.
Yeah, and I think that's something people need to understand. That there's a war within every community. I mean, there's obviously
indoctrinate communism and tell.
I mean, there's an obviously
them that they're teaching them Judaism, and these people are not very tied to Israel. My side of Judaism tries to pull them
Yeah, I think people just need to understand too that, you know, there's even with as there's a war within Western society between right and left, there's a war even within I suppose like the Jewish world between right and left. And you've got to understand that it's like that exists within every culture, every community. I mean, even in Black America, there's a war between right and left. There's a war between right and left in Hispanic cultures. It's everybody has that, and to kind of lump all of those people together. And I think it does. Part of this issue comes up because, I mean, let's be honest, you know, Ashkenazi Jews have incredibly high IQs. They're incredibly successful in Western societies. So they do become into a lot of positions of power strictly because of that in a lot of ways. And you're going to see that. And the one thing, there's so much out there that you can use as propaganda for that kind of JQ element. I mean, something somebody pointed out to me that I started to actually just kind of look at just as a curiosity is, when you see these really anti-American or anti-white articles come out, like the 17 things white people ruined in 2017, when you look at who wrote that article, you start to see these things. The one that I did, it was like the professor that came out and stated that like math is racist and it reinstates math classes reinstated. I did a video on it, white supremacy. It was a Jewish woman who wrote it. And it's like, when people point, you start to look at it, you're like, wow, they got something, you know what I mean? Like this is a little more than coincidental, but I think you have to realize that you're talking about a group of highly intelligent people that are going to get in these positions. So you're going to see them disproportionately more often than, you know, I don't know, a Hispanic woman or something, you know what I mean? It just, and it's not like it's this giant Jewish conspiracy, like they all get together in a synagogue one day and come up with the destruction of the white world. You know what I mean? Like that it's a little more complex than that. And I think that it's intellectually dishonest to just immediately jump and just blame the Jews for everything. I think it's kind of, it's irrational, and it's not going to actually get you anywhere in solving the real problems that exist. And I don't know what you do to combat that. You know what I mean? I think like what AC does with actually being someone on the right who's Jewish and going out there and actually talking to people is the positive thing to do and is the right thing to do, and get people to see that, you know, there's a dynamic within that community as well. It's not like they're all in this giant cabal together or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you pretty much answered my what I was going to say on that. I was going to say that I felt like the alt-right had almost answered their own question, because they were the ones who really they dove into the race realism. They were the one that were pushing it for so long. Yet on those same stats, they were talking about how Ashkenazi Jews have the highest IQ, I believe. So it seems like it would make sense that there would be more of them inside the media, or just that have done successful in life. But yeah,
I think the problem comes in when you start to look at things like the Kalergi plan, where it actually was a plan to multiculturalize the West in order to, and of course there's some arguments on how accurate that is or whatever, but that's one of the big things you'll hear them talk about. And it's that, you know, there was this plan in effect within a group to multiculturalize the West in order to cause instability and break it down and be able to push, you know, Marxist views and communism. And I think that's really the fundamental issue, is it's a communist thing more than it's so much as a Jewish thing. And it's like, that's got to be understood. But like you were stating, when you're dealing with incredibly high IQ population, you're going to have a disproportionate amount of those people in high IQ worlds. You know what I mean?
At the same time, though, I was surprised that so many would, you were saying it's more of a communist issue than a Jewish issue. I'm surprised, because one thing about the communist states was the fact that they were against religion. So they used to actually, like Soviets used to actively go after the church, for instance, the Orthodox Russian Church at the time. So I'm surprised they would be so willing to push for something like that.
When you're talking about like the left wing kind of, you know, international, whatever they call them, you know, I don't know what the alt-right tends to call them, international Jews or whatever. You're not dealing with Judaism from a religious perspective.
Nope.
You know what I mean? It's not a religious thing at all. It's more of a tribal thing. It's more of a cultural identity. So it's not actually about religion. Like she brings up all the time that there's a difference between left-wing Jews and Orthodox Jews. You know, Orthodox Jews actually follow the religion. It's not just a racial ethnic identity. It's actually their religion.
Yeah, but aren't they also?
Can you guys hear me again?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sorry, because I keep breaking up, so I just wanted to double check. But when you get to left-wing Judaism, it's similar to like you have certain churches in America that are like social churches. People go and listen to a watered-down sermon, and then everybody chit-chats after and has cookies in the lobby or in the basement of the church or whatever. Reform Judaism is similar to that. I don't think in Christianity it's as cut and dry as like, you know, if you're this denomination, you're a social church, except for like maybe there's a denomination called UCC. I believe that's a pretty social denomination, but you can go to a Baptist church that could be like very social, or you could go to a Baptist church that's like fire and brimstone, and you know, picture your friends, they're burning in hell, you got to convert them.
Yeah, I mean, most churches nowadays don't even like preach the Bible. It's a bunch of like hippie bullshit. I mean, it really is like you hear some of the
stuff, like what I call social churches.
Yeah, and that's why I have such a hard time finding one, because every time it's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? It's not at all what the Bible says. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, you're also in a blue area. I'm sure there's more social churches in blue areas.
Yeah, for
they
sure.
Get bought off and they turn the area blue, or vice versa. I'm not sure.
You know, the Christian world is so just dry. It's just, you know, they want to get asses in the seats, so they preach a bunch of happy crap and, you know, try to make people feel good about themselves instead of actually doing what the church is supposed to do and affect the morals of society and keep people effectively in a moral code. You know what I mean? It's been a complete, I mean, you have churches left and right that were supporting Hillary Clinton. Like, you cannot actually call yourself a Christian and support someone who like finds it okay to murder babies and for like, you know, transgender marriage. You know what I mean? Like, you can't argue if you're an actual like Christian. Like, it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean?
Hillary is. I mean, this is the same thing with like Jews. I was in a Facebook group last night talking about the shooting, and these people were like, you know, they pulled us crap again. You support the Second Amendment, you're not a good Jew, you know, and they think that supporting gun control makes them a good Jew.
Yeah.
Because this is what their not their church, but this is what their synagogue. If they go to synagogue, this is what they've been told. This is what they're hearing in their community.
Yeah, agreed. And that's like you'll hear Christians say this.
It's going on in Christianity too.
Oh yeah, and it's so funny because, you know, Jesus himself, there's actually a quote in, I think, Mark, where he sends his disciples out, you know what I mean, to preach the gospel or whatever, or preach and whatever. And he says, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. So Jesus obviously was in favor of self-defense, you know what I mean? And a sword at the time, I've actually read into this. I'm pretty confident. I may be wrong. Somebody correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty confident at the time it was illegal for Jews to own a Roman legionnaire sword, or any minority group, unless you were a Roman citizen. You weren't allowed to carry a sword. There was a sword control under the Roman Empire. And he basically instructed his followers to disobey the law and to get a sword and protect yourself. So the argument that Christians aren't supposed to be gun owners is about the stupidest argument ever if you actually believe the Bible.
Well, and I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I think the alt-right blames the policies of Israel on all Jews. Kind of like you can't blame all Catholics for the liberal pope that is sitting in the Vatican right now. I was raised Catholic, so it's easier for me to make that comparison. I mean, just because the head of the church or the head of the state is making certain decisions that you don't agree with doesn't mean the entirety of one group is bad. And I think that's where the alt-right is really messing up.
I agree 100% with that.
Well, I find that too in this day and age, the way they try and package religion is not, it's not appealing to a lot of people, because I'm not religious at all in the sense, but I definitely have found that the way that Jordan Peterson has presented, he does his Bible series, and I've watched those episodes. I've listened to what he has to say on it. He presents it in a much more convincing light than a lot of these priests that, for instance, for Christianity, that are sitting inside the church. So I think that what needs to be done is there needs to be a repackaging of how the message of religion is delivered. Yeah. If that's what you wanted to, if you wanted to bring it back more into it. Again, I'm Like I'm not religious at all, but I don't have I don't represent, I don't like have any connection to like the atheist community or anything like that. But I do see, I have, it was Peterson who, it was painful to admit, but I did see that the problems of, as we've gotten away from a more religious world, that it was the objective morality. It was something that couldn't be circumvented, and you couldn't be surpassed. So regardless of what you did in this life, you had to face judgment at the end. And the problem is if you have a country that doesn't believe in that, then all you have is the law as that sort of objective morality, if you want to call it that. So that's really the problem, I think, of why we're in the position we are today, even from the more secular side.
That's my argument too, has always been, and there are some Christians out there, some Christian apologists. Ravi Zachariah, I kind of disagree with him on some political things, but he's incredibly good at breaking the Bible down and actually looking, like you were saying, at the objective morality and seeing it for what it is, without all of this happy hippie shit that goes along with it in modern days. And I mean, you're right. When you have a society, when you have these moral codes of conduct and these moral standards, and people need to fear judgment. I mean, really, like, if you want to, and this may sound horrible, and not very libertarian of me, but people are kind of caroused by fear in a way, you know what I mean? And when you have that sky daddy figure and you feel like you might have to face judgment to that, you're going to conform to certain social norms or social rules or religious rules or whatever. And I don't think there's any argument to be, I don't think you can ever make an argument that Christianity in and of itself is bad for a society. I don't know that there's an argument for that for the long term. Sure, for certain minority groups, certainly, for homosexuals or what, and the LGBT plus 745s, I mean, for their community, it's probably not the greatest society to live under, but for the overall long-term health of a society, I don't see how Christianity or Christian culture is bad. As long as it's not in a totalitarian state kind of Roman Catholic Pope circa feudalism kind of era, then I don't think that you can argue it's bad. I think it's fundamentally good. That's just my opinion.
I understand why you say that. Now, I would say, like, when we're getting more into the past, like, that's where we saw the violence for sure. But in a modern day, Christianity doesn't fall into the same pitfalls that, say, Islam does, like with the violence and everything. And even the passages that are in the Bible that I think there's a passage in Deuteronomy that may make reference to stoning to death. You won't really find, I don't think I've ever come across a Christian these days that have actually tried to advocate stoning to death for something.
There are some, like, hardline Baptist, I can't remember, Stephen, God, what is his name? I can't remember his name, Pastor Stephen something. He does to a certain degree, but I think the difference in Christianity and Islam is you have Jesus as a reformer, right? Where you had Jesus come in, you had all this Old Testament, hardline laws, and you had Jesus basically come in and say, love the person, hate the sin. You should reject the sin. You should reject the idea of making that a popular thing in your society, but you should not, commit acts of violence against these people. You shouldn't throw them off of roofs. You know what I mean? You try to view the soul of the person and, obviously go to them and say, look, you're sinning, you're doing wrong. You need to clean your room. You need to get your life together. This is not, this is, degenerate behavior or whatever. However, you don't exclude that person. You don't, commit acts of violence on that person. You try to love that person as a child of God. And I think that that's the major, major, major difference between Islam and Christianity.
Bye, Mad Dog. Oh. I said just as he left.
What about you, AC? You're Jewish. What do you think?
The Jewish religion, properly practiced, not, the reformed left-wing version of it. But the Orthodox version is actually one of the things that's different from Christianity is there's not this focus on to hell if you don't do, there's codes, and it's just like there's social pressure to follow the rules. So there's that, but there isn't the same Like if you actually ask somebody, you know, what's our equivalent to hell, or, you know, what is our incentive for living a life according to our rules besides you just do it, the idea is that the better a life you live, the closer you are to God in the afterlife, and people will want to stand as close to God as possible. So that's, I mean, and I don't know if a lot of people probably don't even know that, especially like a secular Jew probably would not know that. Unless of course they're secular and have been raised Orthodox. I think that there's probably people who are Orthodox and don't even know that. But most of the emphasis is on you just do it. Like, we don't have a huge emphasis on, you know, they don't really talk that much about, oh, you're going to be closer to God, you know, it's just this is a mitzvah, this is what you do, you know. We definitely, like, if we see people doing good things, you know, oh, look, this person's doing a mitzvah. It's, I think in a way, on a societal cultural level, it's more similar to how Asians raise their kids, where Asians just expect certain things of their kids, punish them as, like, I've not really heard an emphasis like, oh, they beat their kids if they're bad or whatever, but I know there's a huge emphasis from parent to child, like, this is just expected of you. And everyone in their culture and everyone around them, you know, they don't really question it because everyone is doing what they're expected to do. Like, you know, all their friends are Asian, so their friends also have these expectations from their parents. When you're in an Orthodox community, like, everybody, you know, it's just, you know, being a decent moral person, like, these things are, it's just expected of you. You know, keeping kosher, keeping Shabbos, it's just expected of you. So, you know, dressing a certain way, it's expected of you. You know, if somebody isn't Orthodox and they come to, like, some sort of an Orthodox function, a woman might wear pants, which we're not supposed to do, and they'll just be like, I'm not Orthodox, but they'll still cover up because they understand that if they're in our environment, it's still expected of them to cover up to a certain extent. So,
okay, I kind of.
It's more just.
Go ahead.
Expectations drive it.
Interesting. It's funny how even with different religions, you can still have similar values, eh?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, but I mean, Christianity stemmed out of Judaism, so there's
Exactly.
a lot of correlation in fundamental, you know, moral structures, so to speak. I mean, the only real difference, I mean, as far as, I guess, doctrine would be it interjection of Jesus kind of into the religion and
right.
changing it more to the you know, love thy neighbor, community, you know, kind of forgiveness,
Community
kind of, and not to say that doesn't exist within Judaism, but you know,
right.
that's where that goes. But I'm gonna have to jump off here, guys. I got some family plans.
Yeah, it might be time to end it.
So, yeah, we've been going for about 2 hours now. All right, we'll call it an end.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for being on. This was awesome. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. 100%.
All righty. Thanks, you two. Have a good night.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.